All right, we're back. It's Data Week on the Digital Healthcare Podcast, and I have Ardy Arianpour here. He's the CEO and co-founder of Seqster, and he just gave me a behind-the-scenes demo of the product, and you're in for a real treat because he has taken this vision and really brought it to life. And we'll get into what the platform does, but Ardy, before we go there, I wanted to touch on your background first. Because I've listened to a couple of the other podcasts you've been on, which for the listeners, there's a couple other podcasts out there with Ardy that I'll put in the show notes. I'm going to try to avoid what's already been talked about, so you can go and listen to it, and it's great content and a lot of great background. But one of the things that jumped out with you is that it's personal. It's clearly personal. The passion comes through. If you could briefly kind of frame up your family's history with the healthcare industry. And my question is really, how much of that personal history drives you and kind of motivates you to do what you've done with Seqster?
Sure. It's so nice to be on your podcast. Thanks so much, Brian, for having myself and getting time here to take a look at the Seqster platform. You know, it all really began with the fact that I was, I guess, really interested in DNA sciences at the beginning and got my feet wet with DNA sequencing early on with next-gen sequencing, was at the right place and at the right time, and was able to create some innovation and move innovation within the clinics with next-gen sequencing. And then from there, I was really interested in, whole genome sequencing and being a genomics, I guess, guy. I was one of the first people to get my genome sequenced. When that happened 10 years ago, I realized that my genome data didn't mean anything unless it was paired with my electronic health records. And at the same time, the personal family interest really comes from the fact that, my mom's a breast cancer survivor. My dad is a colon cancer survivor, actually, as of last year. We used the Seqster platform to actually help him through various different interventions, which is a whole cocktail conversation. Both my grandparents passed away from Alzheimer's disease. And so unfortunately, knowing a little bit about genetics and family history, I'm not of best of luck, I guess you get to say, from the disease side that runs in our family. And Seqster definitely hits on a lot of those points.
When did you realize that you wanted to get into genomics or healthcare? Because I know you started hearing your other podcasts at a very early age, and I'm a little bit jealous because I think it's taken me and my life path is I've definitely hit the nail on the head that healthcare is where I want to be, and the impact I want to have is around digital healthcare. I guess, how did that kind of come to be that you got so interested and passionate about it?
Yeah, it was really an accident. I got introduced by actually a neighbor that knew one of the top labs at the Salk Institute. So I started in, biological sciences when I was 16 years old. I realized really quickly that there's, you don't need to be a scientist to change science. And that was really the first, touch, I guess, when I was really young. And then I went off and got a biological sciences degree. I was pre-med and kind of steered directions there. But, passion was always mixing business with science. And, I did have a love for DNA early on, just because San Diego has been just a big genomics mecca or hub, I guess you could say, for the world, really. And from various different research tools and technologies that have came out of innovation from here. And so I think the right place, right time, and just being hungry for, healthcare. And then obviously seeing my mom going through, her breast cancer treatments and so forth at a young age while I was in undergrad. And then, really getting involved with next-gen sequencing in my early 20s really shook things up. And then from there, was able to be part of some of the, I guess you could say, in some of the biggest innovations within next gen sequencing, and it was just perfect timing, I guess.
Did your did your dealing with the data around genomics, was that one of the primary drivers that helped you found Seqster or establish Seqster, because you just recognized the power of data?
Yeah, it was more around actually the fact that there were some tailwinds that were happening. So, being front and center within next gen sequencing clinical diagnostics in my past life allowed us to really take a look at various different things. And direct to consumer genetic testing was really just coming about in the I would say late 2000s, like 2007, 8 or so. Now you have, 30 million plus people that have taken a 23andMe test or an ancestry DNA test or some other type of test. And, we always knew that was going to explode, just because the technology was there. It was getting cheap enough, and there were, various different platforms that can launch. But, no one ever really, took serious how you can take all these datas that's been really siloed and unsilo it. And I was part of that dark side. And then really the passion changed when, we had a real kind of breakthrough on, the EHR side on how, we can shed light on what I call dark data. And that's the data that I just showed you through the Seqster platform. It's the data that exists, Brian, on, every individual. And we have so many different data points, and we've just never been able to bring it all together in one place until, really until Seqster was born.
So talk through Seqster. I got the luxury of seeing it, but try to give the listeners as best you can a picture of what the platform does.
Yeah, so we're a data-driven healthcare SaaS platform where we put the person, the consumer, the patient at the center of their health, and we disrupt the episodic EHR, baseline genetic, and continuous monitoring and fitness data of the individual, and allow them to collect, own, and share that data on their terms. A lot of people have, that have seen the interface and seen the platform just like you, say that we've created the mint.com of health. And so if you're familiar with mint.com, that's what we've definitely done from an interface standpoint, from, how you can actually bring together, let's say, your Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and student loans and see your net worth. Well, with Seqster, we're able to bring all your disparate data from, various different data that's been siloed from your health standpoint and bring together what I call your net health.
And in doing so, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. Anybody that's familiar with digital health or healthcare in general knows that there's this data interoperability problem that everyone's trying to solve. What struck me, though, with your platform is it's quite a bit different. It's such a different approach than what others are taking, because I'd say others are playing the middleman between a bunch of different parties and trying to connect data. You're doing that, but creating your own platform. So I'm guessing you probably don't see yourself as a middleman. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, actually, it's great that you got to see the platform and for you to judge us that we're not the middleman, right? But you're totally correct. We are not the middleman. We're the ecosystem. We've created, the operating system for health data and healthcare.
And just to give listeners, here's directly from your website. Here's everybody that you can interface with: payers, providers, clinical research foundations, and consumer health. That's a lot. Why did you decide to go so broadly, and did you do it intentionally?
Yeah, no, not at all. That was a complete accident. So, really falling on the whole interoperability, problem, that what we call, complete interoperability. There's never been complete interoperability. We fell on that completely on accident, and we call it, and we coined it, complete interoperability. It's a real complete interoperability solution. That's what Seqster is. And, everyone is seeking health data. That's something that I always say. And the reason why I keep repeating it is because if you're a payer, if you're a provider, if you're a clinical research group, if you are a pharmaceutical company, if you're some huge consumer brand that wants to get into healthcare, if you're some big self-insurer, or even a foundation that needs a platform, you are seeking health data, and you are seeking it in one way or another. It could be different for your members, and the individuals that would be using the system, but at the end of the day, you're seeking it, and people are seeking Seqster, and the various different, I guess, segments comes from the significant large inbound interest for our platform.
You frame them as partners. I'm curious why you frame them as partners and not kind of upstream data sources or something along those lines. And in partners, are you in real time feeding or receiving feedback from the different connections you have?
Yeah, so the reason why we call them partners, it's more like innovation partners, right? I think a lot of folks in those various different segments, whether it's the payers and providers or clinical research groups, or consumer brands, they're looking for innovation to move the needle, right? And so they are partners of Seqster, meaning that they are seeking out a partnership with our platform from a B2B angle.
Makes sense. What are some of the challenges you run into with having such a diverse set of stakeholders that you're working with?
Yeah, our biggest challenge has been to prioritize the certain requests. As you saw, we've built something with scale in mind, and so we get lots of various different requests every day where you can see how the beauty of Seqster is everyone wants to use it for their own purposes, and because we're a SaaS business, our metrics for success are really the number of customers we can bring on and the number of patients or members or customers that are brought onto the platform via our B2B model. At the end of the day, it comes down to giving the right attention to the right partners that have their mission aligned with ours, and that's really three simple things: data ownership, collection through the individuals and members and patients, and then the sharing capability for those folks to be able to do what they want.
That's good framing. Those three problems that you're tackling, are all three of them equally important, or do you prioritize within those three?
Yeah, I think they're equally important, but depending on what segment you're really focusing on, or what the particular um, request is, and what big pain points we can solve, it can shift.
I you inspired me as I was doing the research to think more about data ownership and sharing, because I think we've talked a lot about patients owning their data, but there's never been anything really tangible to bring that to be a reality, at least from what I've seen. And I think you kind of have started that process of opening my mind to thinking, okay, there's actually a reality that I could own my data in the future. I guess, is there anything kind of mental training you have to do for the patients to kind of get them in a new mindset? Because it's such a different way of approaching how you think about and manage your own health data.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, Brian, talk about data ownership, right? A
Hmm.
lot of companies out there talking about data ownership, but they actually haven't created anything to actually let people, collect and own and share their data. And I think you just saw the Seqster platform, right? And so our mission at the beginning was, the big pillar behind the company is one of the big pillars other than privacy and security is really how do you actually enable ownership? And again, people can talk about ownership all day long within healthcare and technology, but at the end of the day, if you're not actually empowering individuals and families to really own their data and collect it, then it's not possible. And so we use that framework to really build a platform that is comprehensive in the collection process to begin with. And obviously, at the same time, in parallel, you're empowering people to own that data and consent however they wish.
Yeah, I think you hit on two, kind of using Apple or Amazon or some of the other major tech players as an example, and designing it, the interface, to where it's so completely simple that even a 10-year-old could figure it out. That's been a big piece of that's been a big part of designing the system, right?
Absolutely. And, I think Apple and Amazon and all those, very large tech players that are trying to get into healthcare have done us all a favor, because they've done all the free marketing to the individuals, number one. Number two, um, uh, it's the fact that there's certain limitations with their ideas and their platforms. For example, if you look at Apple, well, what happens if you have a Samsung phone? What happens if you don't have an iPhone at all? How do you use Apple medical records? You can't, right? And so with us, we took an agnostic approach where, it's not direct to consumer, it's direct to member, what I call DTM. And we've created, and we started, 3+ years ago, with the individual and families in mind. And so again, our competitive strength is that, we have built something from the consumer's view, but for enterprise.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think it's another reason to commend you guys, because I think it's the same as uh, ownership of healthcare data. A lot of people talk about it, but it's not a reality. And um, to be able to create something with the patient in mind, I think a lot of healthcare uh, players within the industry fall into the trap of saying they have the patient in mind, but it's always kind of the patient in mind, but also our own priorities in mind as well. And it's finding that balance that's the tricky part. Whereas you've kind of completely blown away the traditional model and kind of built it from the ground up, where you don't have those conflicting priorities, right?
Absolutely. And I think, again, at the end of the day, if you're going to change healthcare, you cannot be doing what everyone has been doing for, years and decades, because you're just not going to change it. We truly believe that, the way to change healthcare is through the patient and working with patients and the individuals. And we've always done it from the other way. And so, we didn't want to create another EHR, company, another silo, I guess you could say. At the end of
Mhm.
the day, we wanted to figure out a way where, individuals can own and share their data on their terms and truly unsilo their data in a very simple manner. As you saw, in 60 seconds, we're able to connect, thousands of hospitals through the Seqster platform. It's incredible what the Seqster team has been able to accomplish in such a short period.
So let's dig into a bit more on the problems that the platform can actually solve. And one of the things that jumped out to me is every time I go to visit my physician, it's always kind of a little mini experiment to see where we're at from a healthcare perspective. And it continues to blow my mind that the conversation always starts with "How's it going?" And it's a kind of a futile exercise where I try to give the complete rundown of my health in a matter of minutes for an extended period of time. Is that is that kind of at the heart of the problem you're trying to solve, to make it a much more data driven conversation?
Yeah, I think that gets into, the fact of, are we really, a solution for changing the whole doctor visit experience, right? And I think it comes down to, again, how you look at Seqster. The big pain point that we've been able to solve with Seqster is really interoperability, right? UCSF and UCSD don't talk to one another, but through our platform, you can connect that data. If you're a chronically ill patient and you have, let's say, 7 health systems across the country, from NYU to Cleveland Clinic to Mayo to Baylor to Sutter Health to Scripps in La Jolla. Well, as you saw, our platform is able to solve that big problem. At the same time, we've been able to apply that interoperability technology across multi-dimensional data. So it's really three things. We bring and we've solved the longitudinal complete health history problem, at the same time bringing together multi-dimensional and multi-generational data. As you saw, I can have my grandmother's, my mom's, and my data, on the same platform. And how this really can change, let's say one day the doctor visit experiences, for example, with your own data and your family's data on Seqster, on your smartphone as an example, the question of family history of X, Y, and Z is now so much easier, right? That simple question. The social determinants of health can also be more easily addressed because most of the care happens outside of the doctor's office and hospital, and we collect all that information as well.
So give maybe a couple examples of, if you have any, of real life practical implementations of the platform, and what are some of the benefits that have been realized?
Yeah, what I can share with you is the fact that, providers have, a large problem right now with just the collection of medical records, right? And we are a complete turnkey SaaS solution for any provider that is working with various different patient access groups within their, innovation teams, and is looking to, break down the data silos, collect that data faster so that they can get the right care at the appropriate time to the individuals and the families. At the same time, we empower chronically ill patients to gather all their medical records themselves. There's nothing more empowering if, you have, let's say, your financial records, together in one place, and you get to go do, your taxes, right? Or you prepare all your financial information, and then you find, a CPA and you give that information, and, they get to do your taxes. And so I kind of use that analogy where we're able to do that and save healthcare, really billions of dollars. I mean, one of the biggest costs, not number one cost, but one of the biggest costs in healthcare is the fact that, again, it's an interoperability problem. It's a $30 billion problem where, the systems aren't talking together, and that gets passed down to your family and my family on various different costs when we're sick.
And when just current state, when you don't have that interoperability, it just you put the position, or you put healthcare providers in a position to make decisions with the limited amount of data. I think that sounds obvious, but I think when you compare the two, it points out the potential benefit.
Yeah, and the reason being is, at the start of our discussion, we kind of touched on this. We didn't start out trying to solve interoperability, really, but by the approach we took by putting the consumer, the person, the patient at the center of their health data, we solved that by accident. And that opened up a whole new way of, solving some of the biggest pain points in healthcare.
Yeah, it makes sense. So where are you at from a company perspective then? So you've developed the solution. I'm assuming you're still kind of expanding functionality, expanding partnerships, and it's not officially launched from a consumer perspective still, right?
So everything on Seqster and what I showed you has been built. So the platform is deployed. We deployed it to 3 various different partners last year. And we are able to work with those partners to make various different products within our SaaS offering. And, now we are fully focused on payers and providers, which are coming to us to deploy a, unique version of Seqster to their members. And what we've done now is we've, been able to standardize and harmonize Epic, Cerner, Allscripts, McKesson, Athena Health, NextGen, Practice Fusion data from the EHR end, which now we have over 3,000 hospitals integrated into the platform. We have nationwide coverage for the platform, as well as, every single direct-to-consumer DNA testing company integrated, and, the top continuous monitoring and wearable, and even, a dozen or so medical device companies integrated into the platform. We also spent, the last year focusing on various different rural areas, where now we have 45,000 plus small doctors' offices and medical clinics integrated into the system as well. And so if you're in a small city, in Idaho that is not, have a large health system, like let's say a Kaiser or a Sutter or, a Mayo and so forth, or, the platform can retrieve your data and add it to any other medical records that you had from the past, or any other disparate data sources.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the more underserved portions of healthcare, the rural areas, because me even living in Indianapolis, which isn't a huge city, I have tons of options and can find places to go if I need to or get in a bind. But those areas that don't have, maybe they have one option or two options, those are typically the last ones to get this technological advancement, right?
That's right. And this is what's great. We're one step ahead again, right? We're not just the premier platform that has nationwide coverage. I would say, I think it's 5 times the numbers of what Apple actually has currently, believe it or not. But that is absolutely true if you look at the numbers. And, it's the fact that we've been able to concentrate beyond just metropolitan areas. And that's really big, because, if you're going to be a complete solution, you have to, have the largest broad coverage.
When you go to the different partners that you mentioned, is it a hard sell to try to get them on board, or is the industry ready for something like this?
Yeah, what's great about it is, I think the industry doesn't want to deal with companies that impose a lot of IT infrastructure changes to their systems. Since we're turnkey and we're SaaS, software as a service,
Can you
data-driven healthcare
can you
system.
elaborate on what turnkey and SaaS, just for clarity?
Yeah, so turnkey, we're plug and play. So if you're a provider, okay, let's say you're ABC provider, and you ping us, and now you have, let's say, I don't know, let's say you got 1 million patients, and you want a new platform that is a patient engagement platform. You want a platform that breaks down interoperability for you and connects the dots, I guess, per se. We're able to do that turnkey. It's plug and play. For example, what I showed you can be customized for any enterprise or business at scale. SaaS is software as a service. And so we have various different, packages available from, pricing, where payers and providers can license our product and, purchase our data-driven healthcare SaaS software, which is Seqster.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, and I was wanted to clarify, because when turnkey, I think it gets a bad reputation sometimes, because you kind of get in the sales conversations and everyone says things are turnkey, but I think the important point is that you don't have a large infrastructure set up. The integrations are not built custom, right? They're purely able to adapt with whatever the downstream partner you're working with. Is that fair?
That's right. And the reason why it is truly turnkey in our sense, as you saw on the platform before we started this podcast, we're real time direct connectivity. And so when you create a healthcare SaaS, type of CRM, I guess you could say, as some people call us, the real time direct connectivity is what's really turnkey. And we've built a beautiful user interface that can bring in all that EHR data, the device data, the nutrition data, the DNA data, the fitness data, the claims EOB data, imaging data, social determinants of health data, that's where the plug and play and the turnkey really hit on for the Seqster platform.
Makes sense. So coming back to then kind of where you're at as a company. So you talked about the couple partnerships that you started. Do you foresee that be your model where you continue to add new partners at a rate, and then eventually will it go much more broadly, I'd assume?
Yeah, we are now really focused on the inbound interest and the customer interests at scale because we've built something for scale, right? And we want to, deploy the platform to enterprises within, obviously, like I said, the payer and provider markets that are interested in, changing the way just things have been done traditionally. And we're just seeing a lot of interesting things where we fit in and how we can, really help their businesses and their initiatives and just fast track the enterprises to where they want to break down the silos within healthcare. And a lot of this can be, because of our platform features, right, that we have. The platform itself is, auto synced. We have, beautiful visualization. You can run real-time health data analytics. We got 256-bit data encryption in there. We're HIPAA and high trust infrastructure. The platform is just really sound.
That's interesting. Was the more difficult part kind of getting the industry ready for this and the patients ready for this, or was building the technology? Was that the more difficult part?
So the honest truth is that we never want to do it again, even though it's been amazing. We really look. I think seriously, and this isn't me, trying to be humble or anything, but it was really an accident. I can't say it better. We did not set out to go solve interoperability, but what we did do, Brian, is we had an idea, right? We had a mission. We stuck to that mission, and our mission never changed. And that mission was, how do we figure out and disrupt healthcare, as everyone is saying, not through the providers and payers, but how do we disrupt healthcare through the patient and the consumers, and then empower the enterprises? And we had a shovel, and we kept digging and digging and digging. And if you dig long enough, you're going to find something. Our luck was, we hit the diamond in the rough down there a lot quicker than we found gold. And that was the significant technical breakthrough that we had. And now that's where we've been able to have nationwide coverage where, it was, the team's, engineering, sophistication, and hard work. That's what it all came down to.
So how do you think the future plays out? Because I know, like we've mentioned, a lot of people are taking a stab at solving this problem. Do you think there will be clear winners and losers, or do you foresee a situation where a lot of different players can play in different pieces of the data problem?
Yeah, so I think this landscape is so large, and we always talk about the market, right? When you're talking about health data, you're talking about every single data point and every single person on this planet. 7.7 billion, lives really is the market, right? Now, what I mean by that is, the landscape itself, and even if people crack the code that we have, it's going to take time, number one. Number two, most people don't set out to go crack what we've cracked because it's just not part of a business model. We really didn't have a business model because we wanted to see if we can crack something first. And again, that was our kind of luck too, because if we didn't crack the code, we just wouldn't be around. We've cracked the code, and that's why we're, thriving, not just surviving. And the marketplace, like I said, is very broad and very large, and there's really a place for lots of different players.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing I've learned in doing the podcast. It's like I talked to some guy in the Middle East that's solving a physical therapy problem through digital health, and it's like it just blows your mind how big the industry is, and on the flip side, how much opportunity there is to solve it. Because, like you said, there's 7 billion people that all have the most complex system in the human body that we're struggling to find out, and starting to get closer to where we could have a much better picture of solving some of these chronic, especially the chronic diseases. I think that's the area where I see Seqster probably having the most impact. Would you agree with that?
I think it's one of the areas that we have an immediate
Mm-hmm.
impact. That's for certain.
So talk about then. I think there's a real possibility in we're going from a place where we have very little data and we kind of manage health through conversations to where now we have this huge bolus of data. How do you think we manage that transition? And is there anything that patients can do to help kind of bridge that gap?
Yeah, I think, look, a lot of times, Brian, less is a lot more powerful, right? But when you're looking at various different data sets, first you got to know what you're really looking for, right? What is that? What's the case? What is that value prop? Who's looking for that data, and how are you going to make that data actionable? And so I think there's lots of things that come into play in thinking about it. But one thing is definitely for certain there is that we've never paid attention to the dark data. And again, at the beginning, I mentioned, how we shed light on dark data. And that dark data is your data that exists on you. It's just been siloed. And if we can actually bring all that data together, um, I really truly do believe, and I've seen this happen when patients use our platform and they're literally crying because for the first time they're able to bring their health data together from 7 different health providers where they've never been able to do that, or it's taken months and weeks of phone calls and sometimes having to pay $50 to a health provider to get your CD-ROM or your scan or whatever. I mean, it's just such a huge problem that we all have in our daily lives. And if we don't currently, one day, unfortunately, we will. Because I always say, you're healthy first and then you get sick. And most people don't care about their health until they're sick. But we do care about our loved ones' health. And so, we have to think about how, we can actually even collect and own and share our loved ones' health data.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful point because I know my going through in high school, my grandma had stomach cancer, and it's just the worst feeling when one of your loved ones has a disease, and you just feel so helpless because you're completely relying on the healthcare system to get them back to a healthy state, and just having some sort of feeling like you can do something is a pretty powerful thing to have brought to light.
I think it's just a great first step, and it's something that should have been done long time before. If you would have asked me, well, Ardy, why wasn't this ever done by someone else, before? I think people tried, but the tailwinds weren't there,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, I think Seqster comes at perfect timing, and we've been ahead of the game for the last 3+ years, really just focusing on some of the biggest pain points in healthcare. And it starts and ends with interoperability. It's that simple. And we can empower the, payers, providers, pharma companies, consumer brands in a way that they've never had an enhancement type of platform like this.
Yeah, one other area where I'd say you're ahead of the curve is when you talk about leaving your data for future generations. I think that's something that we've never got there just because it's like we have a big enough problem just trying to get the data that we need here and now. But I think that's a pretty powerful and profound vision to be able to share the data so then we can help solve problems for future generations.
Yeah, and who gets credit for all that, to be honest, is my grandmother. My grandmother passed away 2 years ago now, while we were building Seqster. And, I wanted to have her health data, my mom's health data, and my health data. And I basically said, it's multi-generational data. That's what I thought of, right? And so my grandma kind of lives within the Seqster platform. Our team, took that one example and figured out, hey, how do we actually, productize that and make it a really good feature within the platform? And it's just something that we're really very, very, very proud of, and everyone can relate to, just like you and your grandma.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. You always think about, what's the meaning of life and those deep questions. And I think I always land being able to help people in the future is a pretty worthy cause to go after. And even if you can leave an organ or leave data, it doesn't really matter how you go about that. So I think that's a pretty cool thing that you've incorporated into the company.
That's great.
What can you talk about your team? Because one of the things that's impressive is you've been able to tackle this huge problem, and you've not siloed any particular area as a focus point. How have you constructed your team, and how much cross-functional, cross-domain expertise do you have?
Yeah, so we have what I call a ninja, you know, um, uh, elite force one type of team, I guess you could say. What I mean by that is you don't need, hundreds of people to solve big problems. You just need focus, determination, and just, it's really relentless DNA. And that's what our team has. And our team comprises of folks from the HIT communities to, experts within EHR data, experts within DNA and genomic data, as well as highly sophisticated engineers that know how to build consumer-driven, platforms, but at the same time with a enterprise SaaS model in mind. And it's really been a combination of making this amazing cocktail, and that's what the team is. It's just a really good cocktail that you've never had before. And once you have that cocktail, you just get addicted to it, and you want to find more people like it. And we've been very lucky to have such a strong team within engineering and HIT and DNA data.
What advice would you have for anyone out there that's listening that wants to be a part of something like this, improving healthcare through technology? Is there any common threads or things that you've seen through your experiences that maybe you could share?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is don't have fear. There's a lot of naysayers out there that said that we couldn't do what we do. There's a lot of people still, that, put us down here and there, and they've never even seen the platform. So don't be afraid. I think fear is what kills innovation. And you got to have the guts. And if you have a dream, and it revolves something around, a personal story, there's no more powerful way of tackling it than, getting a bunch of troops around you that share that same mission and tackling, one big problem. I always say, put the big flag on the top of the hill and then have everyone chase after that one flag and solve one problem before solving, many. And I think the problem with, lots of small early stage companies or even startups is they try to solve too many problems at once, and they pivot too much as well. First, figure out what you're solving, and if that takes time, it's okay. Just don't give up.
That's great. Well, I could pick your brain for probably a couple more hours. But I think given the time constraints, we'll have to wrap up here soon. Is there anything that I missed that you want to highlight?
No, I think you covered most of the things. I mean, I'm really glad that you got a chance to take a look at Seqster. Everyone is seeking health data, and if anyone wants to learn more about Seqster, they can go to seqster.com or email us at info@seqster.com, and we're happy to, field those calls or conversations.
That's great. Well, thanks again for sharing your perspective. I can tell you're an entrepreneur because this has been rapid fire questioning, and I love it. That's exactly how my brain works. So it's been fun to get the chance to kind of poke your brain to see where you're thinking about. Um, uh, I would say if anyone is interested too, I would again plug the other podcasts because I think, like I said, there was tons of other stuff that in Ardy and Seqster's background that I find super fascinating. So I'll put those in the links and be sure to check them out. And I know, Ardy, you're on social through LinkedIn and Twitter. So definitely, if you want to follow along with what's coming in the future, I'll include that in the show notes too.
Great. Thanks so much again. It was really a pleasure speaking with you. And thanks so much for your interest. And look forward to maybe a part
Yeah,
two.
let's do it. Sounds like a plan. All right. Well, we'll be back with another great guest soon. Thanks for listening.